Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough.
I need to remind you guys, I want to share this with you that all the food you eat is being donated. Donald Bourgeois Meat Market, all our burritos and food in that room. Donald Spars is cooking jambalaya and white beans and salad and whatever. These guys help us tremendously. Martin Falls comes here, runs, does all this for nothing. Bayou Signs runs 5 big electrical boards, 2 in Houma, 3 in Thibodeau, doesn't charge the church nothing. I just want y'all to know that. We have a lot of guys that send notes to Cindy that says, can't be there, but here's my money. In fact, here's $100. Maybe somebody else can come. I want to thank those guys, even if they're here or not. Many people, think that, have told us, y'all need to go up. That's not about going up. It's not about it. We think we're meeting our needs right now, and we just keep doing it. But we had a little bit more expense this year. We had to fly the Grand Poobah down here, but we made it. Everything's good. And I want to share that with y'all. And while I'm thinking about it, our staff, Father Alex, especially Miss Cindy, Miss Heather, they worked on this for months. And just today, months. So when you see them, you might say thank you because they do a great job. An awesome job for us. What we have next on us, we always have someone give testimony. And we have a young man here today. Nichols student just graduated. And it's a phenomenal story as a father, as a grandfather. After listening to him and his plight and his story, it'll really make you think the grace that you have in your life. Because this young man has really been down the road and he's still traveling. He fortunately ran into Father Mitch and he's seen the light. And he's a great young man. I'm going to ask him to come up here and to hear his story. Lars?
So as Father Alex, Father Mitch, Mr. Dwight said, I'm Lars. Some of y'all know me in this room. A lot of y'all do, but for those of you who don't, I've been involved in the diocese since about 2019. I went to Nichols. I worked at St. Thomas. I've done a lot of things around the diocese, so you might see me certain places. But yeah, every time I'm presented with the opportunity to share my testimony, whether that be, I've done it at Awakening, I've done it at Seek, I've done it at senior retreats for E.D. White. I've done it a bunch of different times. And I always say yes because, first of all, just to be able to share my story and maybe some people can relate or just be able to, it's kind of like a burden lifted off of me because it's an amazing grace just to be vulnerable with people, especially men that I look up to and just people in my diocese that I truly do love a lot. So, yeah, through this talk, I'm just going to share my story. How the Lord was present in all of it and just how he led me ultimately to today, but just my whole journey as a man. So yeah, so for the first part, I'm going to show y'all some images. These are some images that I found online of a person. He's famous, and so I'm going to show 5 of them. Some of y'all may have seen this person. A lot of y'all may have not. And at the end, so I'm just going to go through them real quick. I just want you to look at them. And as I'm going through them, so just take like 10 to like 20 seconds just to think of a word or a couple words that come to your brain. And so for those of you who don't know, just keep it to yourself. But for those of you who might not know who this person is, I just want you to raise your hand. And I'm going to call on maybe 2 or 3 men just to say a couple words that these pictures evoke. And so yeah, if a couple people want to raise their hand, I'm just going to get some words that came to mind. And then I'll explain how this relates to me. Right here.
Halloween.
Okay? Yes, sir.
Lars. Eagle.
All right, I'll take 2 more.
Savannah.
Okay, and 1 more. Right here.
Demonic.
Yes. So yeah, all these words are super prevalent, and I'll explain why. So these are a couple of pictures of my family when I was young. This is my mom, this is my dad, and this is me when I was super young. And yeah, so throughout my story, I'm going to tell y'all like my childhood and how I was raised. And so this is the last slide. And so a lot of y'all said a lot of words that are super accurate and apply to me in a lot of ways. And one word that y'all didn't say, which I would never expect y'all to say this, was father. So this is my dad right here when I was about 1 or 2 years old. And so this is the same man. So yeah, this is my dad's name. This was his name, Chad Curry. My name is Lars Curry. And so when he switched, lost everything, he changed his name. So if you look at this is C-H-A-D. So it's Chad backwards. And if you put this M-U-R over here, it spells murder. So yeah, growing up, I lived a pretty normal childhood. And I grew up in Dallas, so that's where I was born. I lived there almost my whole life. And so when I was 5 years old, my parents got divorced. And they still both lived in Dallas. And I would go back and forth, mom's house 1 week, dad's house 1 weekend. And it was this constant pull and battle to figure out like where home was. And it was very hard. So my dad, he worked for a designer company. And my mom, she sold furniture for a very big company in Dallas. So I would go to these shows that they would have to put on because they were both single parents and there was no one to watch me. So I was like 9 or 10 and I was going to these huge shows in Dallas in these big high rises and all over the place. And it was a big culture shock for me because I was kind of forced to grow up at an early age. And people who were at the show would know that I was Nicole's son or Chad's son, and they would talk to me just to kind of keep me entertained. So just at a very super young age, I was exposed to this crazy culture that Dallas was. And so when I was 10, my dad moved to New York. And so my mom was kind of left by herself. And so I was raised by a single mom. And that's when my dad moved to New York, he started to take on this image, started to dress in all black, bleached his skin white, and started to turn into what he is today. And then when I was 16 years old, he moved to Tokyo, and then Belgium, and then London, because he didn't pay any child support growing up, so he was running, because he knew that if the IRS were to ever catch him, he would go straight to prison. But since he's out the country, they can't touch him, like he's safe, I guess you could say, and he knows that. So he will never come back to the United States because he knows the situation that he would be in. So my mom is raising me by herself, and we all know, and the stress of raising a kid is something that I've never experienced, but I know for a single mom, it was probably very hard because her parents were in Lafayette. Like there was no one really to help her out. Financially, emotionally, spiritually, nothing. So, and when we get in these spaces of being stressed and not knowing what to do, we as humans, we tend to grasp. That's our nature. It's our fallen nature. And so my mom definitely grasped, and so my whole childhood, she was an alcoholic. And it was very hard because seeing that at a super young age, when I was in 7th grade, we moved to an apartment that was walking distance from my school. So I would just walk to school. She didn't have to drive me. So when she would get off of work, she would go to a bar and she would drink because she knew that I could just walk home. And I went to culinary school, so I would cook for myself every night. Like I would cook myself dinner from probably the age of 12 up. And I would just eat in my room by myself. I would get in my bed and I would wait for the door to open. I knew she was home. And then I would wait for her room to close and I knew she was passed out. And it was hard, like growing up like this cycle of just when is it gonna end, when is it gonna end? And everybody knew, all of my friends knew that this was going on because I would call them sometimes and be like, hey, can I like come over? Like my mom's not home and I just don't wanna be by myself. So I would just couch hop all throughout high school. and it was crazy. And meanwhile, while this is all happening, the situation with my dad, it was hard to grasp that like this man right here could turn into what he is now. Because when I look at him, I see exactly what y'all said. I see Satan, I see the devil, I don't see a dad, like I don't see Chad, like Chad's gone. And so my mom, this was her ex-husband, so it was also super hard on her. So when I was 16, I was a junior in high school, and we lived in the same apartment, and not going into like super detail, but it just got very bad. And one night it was just really rough. It was October of 2015. And I went to school the next day because I called my best friend Barrett. I said, hey, I gotta get out of here. Like it's not safe. He's like, okay, like you can come over. I'm like, okay, thanks. So the next day I'm in class, I'm in last period English. And there's a knock at the door, and it's a bunch of men in like clipboards and suits, and they said, can we see Lars Curry? And I knew who it was immediately when they walked in, and it was Child Protective Services, it was CPS. And Barrett's mom called the principal and told her what happened. And then the principal called CPS, and then, so I was legally taken out of my home when I was 16 years old when I was a junior. And I finished out, so that was in October. From October to December, to finish out the fall semester, I actually lived with my high school principal because no one else could take me in. And then from January to May, I lived with my foster parents. And then May, I moved out of state to Lafayette, Louisiana, because I couldn't be in the same state as her. So all of this is going on. I'm leaving the city that I've known for my whole life. I'm leaving all of my friends. I'm leaving everything. And all I have now, and I love them to death, but I was just not used to living with my grandparents. But now I do. And I have to figure it out, and I have to do my best. And so my senior year of high school, I went to high school in New Iberia. Didn't know anybody, knew absolutely zero people, and I just felt alone. And it was very, very tough because I just longed for that relationship. Like the two desires of the human heart are to love and also to be loved. And I just felt that I just wasn't being loved. And senior year comes around, it's wrapping up, starting to get to like March, April, May, and I'm trying to figure out where I want to go to college. And I made some really good friends. Like it was actually a very good year. But my grandparents knew that I loved to cook, and they knew that my passion was culinary school. So they found Nichols, and I was like, okay, like I've never heard of it before. It's in a small city called Thibodaux, but I'll visit. And so I got into LSU, UL, and Nichols. And I chose Nichols because it has one of the top culinary programs in the US. And so I got here in fall of 2016, and I didn't know anybody again. So I wanted that relationship, and I grasped. I joined a fraternity. I just lived that whole life for about 2.5 years. Partied, everything you could think of. And I remember it was one night, and I just woke up, and I just didn't remember anything. And I told myself, I was like, I need to change. Like, I need to stop, and I need to find God. I hadn't gone to church in over 2 years. I was raised Protestant. So I would go to church every Sunday with my grandparents once a week. I would go to youth group, and that was basically the extent of everything.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Parabon General Health Systems, modern technology, and timeless caring. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bourke, know your rights. South Louisiana Bank, it's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough. Alford and Associates, for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.
And so it was fall of 2018, and I have that recognition that I want to find him, and I start going to Living Word, the non-denominational church on 311. And I'm starting to get, I guess you could say, like better. Like I'm starting to dip my toes in the water. And time goes on, things are going pretty good, and then spring of 2019, so I'm a junior. It's Father Mitch's first year at St. Thomas. And I had a crush on a girl, and so there was a retreat called Awakening. A lot of you may have heard of it. And I'm not gonna lie, I went because of her. Like that was the reason that I went. And God knew that my yes, even though it was because of that, like he was ecstatic for that. So I have no idea that it's Catholic at all. Like I have no clue. So I walk in, I'm the only non-Catholic there. I walk in and I'm like, okay, like they dip their fingers in the holy water, like they're doing this, like I'm very, very out of place, like super uncomfortable. And so Friday night mass happens, and I actually accidentally received Jesus. I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to do that. So Saturday comes along, and we're doing everything, like we're doing the fun stuff, everything like that. And then Saturday, adoration comes. And one of the things that they do, spoiler alert, is, so Father Mitch, he was the pastor. So they did benediction. Granted, I have no idea what any of this is at this point. But he picks up the monstrance, and he processes to each student, and he just sits with them for about a minute. And so I'm in the front pew. I don't know if any of y'all ever been to St. Thomas, but I'm in the front left pew. I remember the date. It was February 9th of 2019 at 8:45 at night. I'll never forget it. So I was basically like right here in like comparison to St. Thomas. And so he's the first, like we're the first people that he comes to. I'm like, okay. So the girl is right next to me. He processes, her name's Erin, and he goes to her, and I have no idea what the Eucharist or the monstrance or any of this is. And so I'm very confused, but my heart was starting to like beat out of my chest. And I was getting super nervous, and I'm like, I don't even know what this is. Like, why am I nervous? So he comes to me, and I mean, he's in the back. Like, I will never forget this moment. I know he'll never forget this moment. He rested the monstrance on my head, and he wrapped me up in his chasuble, and I just immediately just like fell to my knees, like lost control of my body, and I just started sobbing. And it was like, that was the moment that I'll never forget, and that was the moment that God, he always chose me my whole life, but that's when I recognized that he chose me. And that night, I walked around St. Thomas with Father Mitch, and I said, Father Mitch, I have no idea what just happened, but I know that that was pure love, and I just want to be a part of it, and I want to be Catholic. And granted, it's February, so RCIA started like 5 months ago in August, and confirmation is in April. And we did a speedy RCIA, like literally 2.5 months. And before Connor, Jeremy was playing piano, and Father Mitch was telling me on our walk around the church, he's like, Connor Jeremy came up to me, and while he was playing piano, he said that he looked over at me and you, and he said that it was so holy it burned his eyes, and he couldn't even look at it. And so I just knew that it was real. And from February to April, only 2.5 months, I did RCIA, and then I got confirmed in April of 2019. And I'll never forget it. Like, and Erin, she was my sponsor. So my best friend, while I went to the retreat, so she was on the altar for the most important day of my life. And then 2 years ago, I got to be an altar server and be on the altar when she got married on the most important day of her life. And that was just a really cool moment for me, because I knew that, like, I just found him. And it's still been a crazy struggle. Like, my book is still being written just like all of ours. Like, my story is still going and going and going. And just for me, that part of my testimony is revealed in an absolutely beautiful way. Like, I did not have a father growing up. When I look at my earthly father, I see the devil himself. And it breaks me every time I talk about it, because I want Chad back so bad, like I do. I would give anything in the world to see my dad again. That version, not what he is now. But I know that God, that whole time, everything that I was going through as a child, he was there the whole time. He's like, look, I got you, like, just trust me. And he knew that 5 or so years later, I would come to Nichols, and then 2 years after that, I would go to Awakening, and then I would have that moment with Father Mitch, and the restoration of fatherhood for me has been an incredible journey. Like Father Mitch, he's not like my dad, like he is my dad. Like that is my dad. Like that man is the reason that I'm literally standing up here. He's one of the reasons I'm alive. Like it is amazing. And some of the men in this room I look up to as a father a lot because, yeah, I just never had that figure, and God has placed so many men in my life that have helped me so much, and I can't ever thank y'all or him enough because that matters so much to me, and that's what keeps me going. And so, yeah, that part of my testimony is revealed in a beautiful way. And I guess you could say the second half, the part that is still being written. So when I was 2 years old, actually like probably a year after this, I was diagnosed with a rare kidney disease called Dennett's. And it slowly breaks down the function of the kidney. So we knew, my family knew, that I would need a transplant eventually. They knew it was going to be something that I would have to have. We didn't know when, but they monitor you super, super close. So once or twice a year, I would go to the kidney doctor, and he'd be like, okay, like this is your percent, like you're good. But once it gets below this level, like we have to get the ball rolling, and we have to start finding matches. I'm like, okay. So when I was 22, I got below that level. My kidneys were at about 15% function, and they were like, you're gonna need a transplant soon. I'm like, okay, so what do we do? They're like, well, we need to start putting your name on the list, and you need to start finding living donors. I'm like, okay. So when you're on the waiting list for an organ, the first people that they test are your immediate relatives, like mom, dad, brother, sister, anybody like that. So I'm the only child. So they did, my dad's gone, so they did my mom and my aunt and my uncle. So we're going through the process, and my mom is actually a perfect match. And for me, everything that I went through with my mom and that relationship still being kind of broken, I did not want it. Like in my heart, like I did not want it because I knew that part of the reason, and I still love her to this day, and I will always love my mom, and I forgive her, and I forgive my dad. But it was just tough for me to accept it because I knew that it was kind of like a makeup thing, like she was doing it because of everything that happened as I was a kid. So my body and my heart and my mind did not want it at all. And she was a perfect match though. So they put her on the list, and because me and her did not have a good relationship, they actually delayed the kidney transplant about 6 months because they evaluate you and they want to make sure you're mentally, emotionally, everything of your body has to be completely ready. So she actually had to go through 6 months of counseling and get cleared because she was an alcoholic to actually be approved. And so she got approved, and my surgery was scheduled for March 14th of 2022. It's coming up on 2 years very, very soon. And so we went in that morning, and I had my transplant. And I woke up, everything was successful. They keep you in New Orleans locally at like an apartment that's very close to the hospital, just because you have to go in so often. So I was going to the hospital like 3 days a week probably, just because they have to monitor you like so closely immediately after. So I'm going in, and I know some of y'all like may not know what this is, but just to give y'all perspective, there's a number, it's called creatinine, and it measures your function, and it's supposed to be 0.5 to 1.0. So they tested me, it was probably April or May, and mine was at 4. And it just dumbfounded them because this was a perfect match, mother to son. I'm 26, I'm young, and they were like, why is this not working? And they did biopsy after biopsy, they did ultrasound after ultrasound, they sent my case to UCLA, they sent me to Baylor. Father Mitch was there all the time, he was in and out the hospital with me. I was in and out the hospital around 15 times between March and May, and they just could not figure it out. And they looked at me in the eyes, the surgeon came in the room, he's like, look, we have no idea why it's rejecting. We are truly sorry, and we have no choice but to do another one. And obviously, like, I'm upset. Like, I'm like, well, I need this. Like, why is this not working out? And they were like, the only solution is to put you back on the transplant list. I'm like, I mean, okay. So I had to get reevaluated. I met with the surgeon, the nurse, the financial person, everything. I mean, I did a GoFundMe. Some of y'all donated to that. Like I did a jambalaya. I did everything. And it still did not work. And I was just angry at God. I'm like, why is this happening? Like, why? What do you want? And so eventually I got reevaluated and I got put back on the list February of last year. So I've been on the waiting list for a little over a year now. And so now I'm waiting on my second transplant for my successful one. And in that waiting, it's so hard because you want it so bad, and we as humans, we as men, like we want it and we want to feel good, like we want to feel comforted, we want that for ourselves. And in that waiting is one of the moments where I've met God so much, because he's like, look, there is no, like me saying this, there is no reason for me not to trust him. Everything that has happened in my life has ultimately brought me to this point, which is a beautiful, beautiful moment for me, because it is always an amazing grace to be able to share my story. And I know he's like, okay, I've brought you this far, why would I just leave you? Like, why would it be like, okay, like, I'm done with you, I'm done loving you. And that's not the case. So I constantly have to be reminded that, hey, he's watching over you. He has placed people in my life to help me, especially in this part of my story is not over. And I'm still waiting. Every day I'm like, is it gonna come, is it gonna come, is it gonna come? Because I know that the recovery for it, I did it once, it's hard. Like just sitting in a hospital bed, not being able to work, not being able to make money, not being able to do all of these things that normal people do. And it's just, he's always led me back to this point. He's always led me back here. Prime example, I'll kind of end with this story. So when you're on the waiting list for a kidney transplant, so I'm on Medicaid, because that's the only insurance that covers everything 100%. But when you're on Medicaid, they limit your income, and it's very, very low. Like, it's very hard to live off of that. So I have that. So I went to Texas to try to support myself financially in the best way that I could. And for my foster parents, actually, they have a restaurant, and it just did not work out at all. Like, some mistakes were made on my end. They just weren't very fond of me, and literally on my way to the airport to fly home for one of my friend's wedding in mid-December, he texted me and said, hey, by the way, you lost your job. You're not welcome back in Fredericksburg. You can just go home. And it was just a big slap in the face, and I was just confused again. But ultimately, like, I tried to run, and he ultimately led me back here. He's like, look, in this period that you're going through, in this waiting, he's telling me, like, I need you to be around the people that can support you best, which is y'all, which is my parish, which is my diocese. And it's just been an amazing, amazing journey for me, just to see God work in me in every moment where I didn't think he was there, like he was. And throughout my whole life, like, I myself have struggled with an addiction. And it has allowed me to love my mom in such a unique way, because we're all broken. I'm standing up here like I'm broken. Like, I need him. I need y'all. Like, we want that relationship. So yeah, my story, when I tell it, it's a lot has happened to me. And still, a lot is happening to me, because I still wake up every day. And even, like, I told Father Mitch before I gave my talk, I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of numb to my dad. Like, it really doesn't bother me. But when I talk about it and I look at the pictures, I'm like, wow, like, how did this actually happen? Like, I just want my dad back. But when I share this, I don't share it to be like, hey, all of this stuff happened to me. I just want you to feel bad. Like, I want all this stuff. I want it to be like, hey, I went through all of this, and God was present in every single second, and he ultimately led me to this moment. And that's why I give my testimony. It's not a spiritual pride thing. It's none of that. It's because it's just an amazing, amazing thing to be able to share it and just let people know that everything that we go through, good or bad, St. Faustina said that suffering is the purest form of love that a human can experience. And in all of my suffering, do I ask, like, why? Yes. But, like, it's like, how can we invite God into that? So yeah, I have definitely lived the journey, and I'm still on it. And yeah, the quote that I like to end with is, you're not the sum of your past mistakes, but you're the sum of the Father's love for you. And, like, I was not the perfect son, and I didn't have perfect parents, but that's okay. And I know that, like, every mistake that I've made, every mistake that they made, it's okay, and he's still gonna love us in every single moment. So yeah, I definitely appreciate the beautiful, beautiful opportunity to share this story. And I'll be here throughout the day, and if you'd love to talk to me more, I'd love to meet some of y'all. But yeah, it's definitely been an amazing opportunity, and I just really appreciate y'all having me. So thank you.
Thank you, Lars. And one of the things that I got out of that really just works me is that we do grief to grace over here with people who've lost loved ones. And one of the things over the last 10 years or so just keeps ringing bells with me is that all of us who have fatherly wounds, as Lars has, but I heard him say, I forgive my father. And what I found out in grief to grace, that lots of times we lose our fathers and we don't have that opportunity to say, I forgive you, Father. I thought that was a great point that he made. Not only his mother, he has forgiven his father. I want you men just to remember that. That's very powerful. When you have that ability to remember how small we are, we can still forgive our Father.